My husband left for a business trip. I borrowed his laptop and discovered messages that shouldn't exist. Emma, did you pack my portable charger? Mark stood in the doorway with his suitcase half packed. I can't find it anywhere. Check the side pocket, I replied without looking up from my phone. I put it there myself. He checked and nodded. Packing for business trips always turned into a minor chaos. Mark inevitably forgot something, while I supervised from a distance, occasionally looking up from whatever I was doing. This had been our unspoken routine throughout 5 years of marriage. It's just 3 days this time, he said, zipping up his suitcase. Meetings, the presentation, and I'll be back Thursday evening. Nothing special. A typical business trip to Chicago. Mark traveled frequently for work. As a regional development manager for a tech company, he oversaw projects in different cities. I'd grown accustomed to his short absences. Sometimes I even enjoyed these brief periods of complete freedom when I could binge watch shows he couldn't stand, order spicy Thai food he wouldn't touch, or invite my best friend Olivia over for wine and conversations that stretched into the early hours. The morning he left, I was still dozing in bed. Mark kissed my forehead, mumbled something about his Uber already waiting, and quietly left. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The day passed normally, working from home, video calls, project tasks. I'm a graphic designer with flexible hours. In the evening, I FaceTimed with Mark. Everything was fine. He'd arrived safely, checked into the hotel, had a big meeting the next day. Missing me? He asked before saying goodbye. Too busy to notice you're gone, I laughed, but don't stay away too long. He smirked, said he loved me, and hung up. The next day was unusually hectic. A client suddenly changed their requirements for a design project, and I needed to send the revised files urgently. I prepared everything in record time, but when I tried to print the documents, my printer displayed an error message. Rebooting didn't help. It seemed something had broken in the electronics. Looking at the clock, I realized I had only an hour before meeting the client, and I needed those documents signed in person. There wasn't enough time to go to the office. Then I remembered we had a second laptop, Mark's work computer, which he sometimes left at home. Fortunately, this time, he'd taken his new corporate Ultrabook and left his regular laptop on the desk in our bedroom. Without hesitation, I went to get it. Mark had never forbidden me from using his devices. We had no secrets from each other, or so I thought. I knew his password, our wedding date, plus 2 numbers that he never changed. I turned on the laptop, ready to quickly download the files from my email and send them to print. But the system was loading slower than usual. When the desktop finally appeared, I saw an open browser with several tabs. Normally, I would have just minimized everything without paying attention. But among the icons, I noticed a familiar messaging app logo, and something made me take a closer look. Jessica. The name in the open conversation was familiar to me. Jessica, Mark's ex-wife. I knew she existed, but had never met her in person. Mark had been married for about 3 years before they divorced, 2 years before we met. He didn't like talking about that period of his life, and I didn't press. We just grew apart, was all he ever said. They had no children, divided their assets without drama, and that was the end of the story. At least, that's what I thought until now. I froze, staring at the screen. My hand with the mouse hovered in midair. An inner voice said, "Close it. Just close it and mind your own business." But another, more insistent voice whispered, "Look, you have the right to know." I clicked on the conversation. It was quite lengthy. The last message was from Mark, sent yesterday evening. "Arriving Thursday. We'll try to make time." My heart pounded. What did he mean? What meeting? He told me he'd be busy all day and would head straight home in the evening. I started scrolling up through the conversation, trying to understand the context. Work talk, some jokes, article links, and then a phrase that took my breath away. "You were the only one who truly understood me. Sometimes I wonder how things might have turned out if not for back then." Mark had written this a month ago. Jessica replied, "We can't change the past, but I'm glad we can talk again." I continued scrolling, feeling my fingers going numb. They weren't just communicating occasionally. Their conversation was regular, almost daily. They discussed movies, books, shared news. Nothing overtly romantic. Nothing that could definitively be called flirting. But throughout, there was a special closeness, an elusive intimacy that exists only between people with a shared past. "Emma doesn't get my Kubrick references," Mark had written. "You were always the film buff," Jessica replied. "Remember how we watched all his films in that marathon weekend at the Angelica? I really didn't understand his Kubrick references, and I had no idea he was such a fan. In 5 years of marriage, he'd never suggested watching these films together." One of the messages contained a photo, Jessica at some cafe, smiling at the camera. "Almost unchanged," was Mark's comment. I studied her face. Long dark hair, delicate features, intelligent eyes. Beautiful. Nothing like me with my blonde hair and round face. I caught myself comparing us. It was humiliating. I scrolled further and suddenly realized their communication had resumed about a year ago. For a whole year, they'd been messaging, and I had no clue. Mark had never mentioned that he was in contact with his ex-wife again. He never spoke her name around me, as if it were some forbidden topic. In earlier messages, there were more candid admissions. "I sometimes miss our conversations. You're the only person I can discuss this with. I've missed you all these years." My phone chimed with a meeting reminder. I had 40 minutes before the client meeting. I flinched as if caught doing something shameful. Quickly opened my email, downloaded the necessary files, sent them to print. All this on autopilot, while my thoughts swirled around what I'd seen. Just before closing the laptop, I noticed another detail. Their conversation mentioned some meeting 2 months ago. Mark had been on a business trip to New York then. He wrote, "Great seeing you. Wish it could have been more than a couple of hours." Jessica responded, "Next time, we'll plan something more interesting than just coffee." I slammed the laptop shut. My mind was in complete chaos. The client meeting went by in a fog. I said things, smiled, nodded, but my thoughts were completely elsewhere. The client noticed my distraction and asked if everything was okay. I lied about a headache. In the evening, Mark video called. I looked at his face and couldn't believe this was the same person I thought I knew by heart. Now he looked like a stranger. "How was your day?" he asked as usual. "Fine," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "And yours?" "The presentation went great. One more meeting tomorrow, and then I'll head back in the evening. I'll be late, so don't wait up." "We'll try to make time," I remembered his message to Jessica. So he was planning to meet her? Or was I misunderstanding? "What time approximately will you be back?" I asked as casually as possible. He hesitated for a second. It was almost imperceptible, but now, with my senses heightened, I noticed this pause. "Late," he repeated. "Possibly after midnight. The flight is at 11, so I'll be home around 2. I nodded. Before, this wouldn't have alarmed me. Normal schedule. But now I was running through other scenarios in my head. Meeting Jessica, returning late, possibly even taking a different flight than the one he mentioned. "You're unusually quiet today," Mark observed. "Did something happen?" "No, just tired," I lied again. "Had a lot of work." He either believed me or pretended to. We talked for a few more minutes about trivial things. At the end of the conversation, he said he loved me. I repeated those words automatically, then sat for a long time staring at the blank screen. What was I supposed to feel? Jealousy? Resentment? Anger? Inside was a kind of emptiness, as if all emotions had been removed, leaving only a dull pain somewhere in my chest. I couldn't understand exactly what had happened. Infidelity? In the physical sense, perhaps not. There were no direct hints of intimate relations in the entire correspondence, but emotional closeness. Wasn't that a kind of betrayal? Secret messages, undisclosed meetings, shared memories I had no access to. I barely slept that night. Tossing and turning, getting up, drinking water, lying back down. Fragments of their conversation kept spinning in my head, mixing with my own memories. In the morning, I called work and said I was taking a personal day. I needed time to think. My first impulse was to call Olivia, my best friend. She always gave good advice, but I couldn't bring myself to dial her number. I felt ashamed to admit that my perfect marriage, which I'd always been proud of, had a crack. That the husband I spoke of so warmly had kept secrets from me. Instead, I decided to call my mother-in-law. Patricia had always treated me well, though with a certain distance. We called each other on holidays, sometimes met at family gatherings. Maybe she knew something about Mark's first marriage, about why he and Jessica divorced. "Emma?" Her voice sounded surprised. I rarely called her first. "Is everything all right?" Yes, just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." I started cautiously. "It's been a while since we talked." We exchanged the usual pleasantries, and then I carefully steered the conversation toward the past. "Patricia, I've always wondered. Mark hardly ever talks about his first wife. What was she like?" There was a pause on the line. Then my mother-in-law responded with slight confusion. "Why the sudden interest?" I made something up on the spot. "I was just going through some old photos of Mark's, and there were some pictures, probably with her. Got curious." Patricia sighed. "Jessica was a complicated person, smart, educated, but strong-willed. She and Mark were like two sides of the same coin, both stubborn, both principled. That's why they eventually split. They couldn't yield to each other." "But why exactly did they divorce?" I asked directly. "To be honest, I'm still not sure," admitted Patricia. "Mark doesn't like talking about it. I only know the decision was sudden. They weren't fighting or arguing before the divorce. Then one day Mark just said they'd decided to separate. I tried to find out why, but he wouldn't say. There were rumors that she might have been seeing someone else. But those are just rumors, and only they know the truth." I thought about this. If her infidelity was the reason, why would Mark be in contact with her again? Why hide it from me? You know, continued my mother-in-law, after their divorce, Mark changed a lot, became withdrawn, moody. I saw him like that for almost a year, and then you appeared, and he started smiling again. I'm very grateful to you for that, Emma. Her words only intensified my anxiety. So the first divorce had profoundly affected him, left a deep mark. Maybe he never fully let go of that relationship. Maybe Jessica had always remained somewhere in his heart. Has she moved back to town? I asked, trying to make the question sound casual. As far as I know, she's been living in New York for a long time, Patricia replied. She moved there after the divorce. She has a successful career there, I believe in some publishing house. That explained their meeting in New York that I'd read about in the conversation. Do they keep in touch? I asked the final question, aware I was risking raising suspicions. Patricia was silent for a moment, then said carefully, I don't think so. Mark never mentions her. And why would they stay in contact? They've each moved on with their lives. She didn't know, or was pretending not to know. We talked a bit more about nothing important, and I said goodbye, feeling even more confused than before the call. The day dragged on painfully slowly. I couldn't find peace. Tried to read, but couldn't concentrate. Turned on the TV, but immediately turned it off. Several times I was tempted to open Mark's laptop again to reread the entire conversation, but stopped myself. That would be deliberate snooping, an invasion of his privacy. At some point, I found myself looking at our photos together. Here's our wedding, us happy, surrounded by friends and family. Here's a vacation in Hawaii, Mark hugging me on the beach. Here's Olivia's New Year's party. We looked like the perfect couple, always side by side, always together. Could it be that all this time another woman was in his life? Even if only in messages, she was there. I remembered how a year ago, around when their communication resumed, Mark started staying late at work more often. Talked about an important project, deadlines. I believed him. Then it passed, and his normal schedule returned. Coincidence? Or during that period they started meeting, then switched to online communication? Dozens of versions swarmed in my head, each worse than the last. I caught myself looking for confirmation of my suspicions in everything. In his habit of putting his phone face down, in his sudden business trips, even in the way he sometimes looked through me, thinking about something of his own. By evening, I'd calmed down somewhat and tried to reason logically. What did I know for certain? Mark was messaging his ex-wife. They discussed shared memories, culture, work. They may have met several times, but there was no direct evidence of physical infidelity. Maybe it really was just friendship? Strange, awkward, but still friendship? Then why did he hide it from me? Why did he never mention that he was in contact with Jessica again? And most importantly, what should I do now? When it got completely dark, I finally made a decision. I wouldn't make a scene, wouldn't demand explanations. At least not right away. First, I'd observe, listen to what he said about the business trip. Maybe he'd admit he'd seen her. And if not, well, then we'd need to have an honest conversation. At 11:30 p.m., a message came from Mark. Flight delayed. We'll be home around 3 a.m. Don't wait up. Love you. I sent a brief, okay, see you soon, and waited. Made myself strong tea, turned on the nightlight in the living room, and sat in an armchair with a book I couldn't read. Just looked at the pages, turning them occasionally. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the key in the lock. Mark had returned earlier than promised. I remained sitting in the armchair, not moving. He entered quietly, obviously thinking I was asleep, put his suitcase by the door, hung up his jacket. "You're not sleeping?" he asked in surprise, noticing the light in the living room. "Waiting for you," I replied, trying to keep my voice normal. "How was the trip?" Mark walked into the room, sat across from me. He looked tired, but not exhausted from a long journey, more like tense. "Everything's good. The presentation went perfectly. The contract is practically in the bag." He started telling me about business meetings, how he impressed the clients, what prospects were opening up for the company. He spoke smoothly, fluently, as if reciting a pre-learned text. Not a word about Jessica, not a hint of meeting her. "Why did the flight arrive early?" I asked when he paused. "You wrote that you'd be here at 3. Mark hesitated for a moment, but quickly recovered. "They must have made up time in the air. I was surprised myself." I nodded, pretending to believe him. The next question was harder for me. "Have you eaten? I can heat something up." "No, I had dinner on the plane," he answered, looking away. This was an obvious lie. The 11:30 p.m. flight wouldn't have hot food service, especially not at night. "Did you use my laptop?" he suddenly asked, looking at the table where his computer lay. My heart sank. Had he noticed that I'd looked at his messages? Was there some program that tracked activity? Yes, I decided to tell the truth. My printer broke. I urgently needed to print documents for a client. I used your laptop. "Ah," he said with some relief. "I see." I took the plunge. The browser was open, and the messaging app. Mark froze. I saw how his shoulders tensed, how the corner of his mouth twitched. "Emma," he began. "I saw your conversation with Jessica," I said calmly. "Accidentally? I wasn't deliberately reading your messages. But I saw." A long pause followed. Mark stared somewhere past me, as if gathering his thoughts. Then he sighed. "We're just in touch. Nothing serious?" "Why did you never tell me you were in contact with her?" I interrupted. "Why did you hide it?" He shrugged. "I wasn't hiding it specifically. I just didn't think it was important. We occasionally message, discuss books, movies." "And meet," I added. "In New York 2 months ago, and today in Chicago." Mark closed his eyes for a second, then nodded. "Yes. Sometimes we see each other when I'm in cities where she currently lives or travels for work. Just friendly meetings, coffee, conversations." "Why did you never tell me about this?" I repeated. Mark was silent for a long time, then said quietly, "I was afraid you wouldn't understand, that you'd start getting jealous, making scenes. Jessica and I, we have a complicated history." "A history I know almost nothing about," I noted bitterly. "You never told me why you divorced." He grimaced, as if in pain. "That was a long time ago. What difference does it make now?" "It matters to me, especially now, when I find out you've been secretly communicating with your ex-wife, writing to her that she understood you like no one else, meeting her and lying to me about it." My composure was beginning to fail. My voice trembled, my eyes stung. "Emma, listen." Mark leaned forward, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. "There's nothing between Jessica and me. We're just friends. Yes, we were married once, but that's in the past. I love you, only you. Then why did you write to her that she was the only one who truly understood you, that you think about how things might have turned out differently? He sighed. Those were just words. Nostalgia, memories. Haven't you ever thought about your exes? I have, I admitted, but I haven't messaged them behind my husband's back, haven't met them secretly. We fell silent. The room felt stuffy, though the window was cracked open. I could feel my cheeks burning with tension. Tell me the truth, I asked, finally. Why did you divorce? And why are you in contact again now? Mark was silent for a long time, then began speaking, quietly, as if talking to himself. We met during our junior year at Boston University. Jessica was studying literature. I was in business. She was special, well-read, sharp-minded, always had her own opinion on everything. We could talk for hours about literature, philosophy, art. I was different then, more interested in all that. Then life got busy, work, everyday concerns. He paused, collecting his thoughts. We got married right after graduation. Our parents were against it, said we were too young, that we should get established first. But we didn't listen to anyone. The first year was happy, despite being broke and renting a tiny apartment. Then problems started. What kind? I asked when he fell silent again. We were too similar, Mark smirked. Both stubborn, principled. She was building a career in publishing. I was trying to break into the business world. We had less and less time for each other. We started drifting apart, though on the surface everything seemed normal. I listened, holding my breath. Mark had never before talked about this in such detail. And then, he faltered, Jessica had a miscarriage, 4th month of pregnancy. We hadn't planned on having a child. It happened by accident. But when it happened, something broke in both of us. My breath caught. I hadn't known about this, never heard that he had almost become a father before we met. She fell into depression, Mark continued. I didn't know how to help her. I thought we should just move on, not dwell on it. But she needed to talk about it, to process the grief. We stopped understanding each other, and 6 months later, we decided to divorce. It was painful, but we both thought it would be better that way. And why did you start communicating again? I asked after a pause. Mark rubbed his forehead. A year ago, I happened to see her article in a literary magazine. She'd become successful, an editor. I wrote to congratulate her. She responded. We started messaging, rarely at first, then more often. It was like meeting an old friend. Someone who knows you, gets your jokes, remembers the same stories. And that's why you hid it from me, I asked bitterly. Because it was just friendly correspondence with an old friend? Mark sighed. I was afraid you'd misunderstand, that you'd think there was something between us. But there isn't anything, I swear. We just talk. And the meetings? I reminded him. Why do you meet? For the same reason. He raised his voice, but quickly composed himself. Just to talk in person, not just in messages. We have coffee, discuss books, work, nothing more. I shook my head. You lied to me, said you were working late, that you had business meetings, but you were meeting her. Yes, and that was a mistake, he admitted. I shouldn't have kept it secret, but I really was afraid of your reaction. We fell silent again. In the quiet, I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Do you still love her? I finally asked the question that troubled me most. Mark looked me straight in the eyes. No, not in the way you mean. I have warm feelings for her, as for someone I've been through a lot with. But I love you, Emma. Only you. I wanted to believe him. I really wanted to. But something inside me resisted. Then why did you write to her that she was the only one who truly understood you? That you sometimes think about how things might have turned out? Mark grimaced. It was a moment of weakness. I was going through a difficult time at work. Remember, the project almost fell apart. I felt like no one understood me. I wrote to her in a moment of nostalgia, I guess. It didn't mean anything, honestly. I wanted to ask about so much more. Why hadn't he told me about the lost child? What exactly did he and Jessica discuss? What did they talk about during their meetings? But suddenly, I felt such exhaustion that I had no strength left even for conversation. I don't know what to think, I said quietly. I need time. Mark nodded. I understand. And I'm sorry. Sorry I wasn't honest with you. He reached out, trying to touch my shoulder, but I stood up. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. I need to be alone. The next few days passed in a strange numbness. Mark and I barely spoke, only when necessary, about everyday matters. He left for work early, returned late. I also loaded myself with work to think less. On the third day, I called Olivia and asked to meet. I needed advice, an outside perspective. We met at a small cafe near her apartment. Olivia immediately noticed something was wrong. You look like you haven't slept in a week. What happened? I told her everything about finding the messages, the secret meetings, my conversation with Mark. Olivia listened without interrupting, only occasionally frowning or nodding. And what are you feeling now? She asked when I finished. I thought about it. I don't know. Hurt? Disappointment? He always seemed so honest, straightforward. And now I learn he's been hiding an important part of his life from me. And not just hiding, lying, making up excuses to meet her. Do you believe there's nothing between them? Olivia clarified. I want to believe, I admitted. But how can I trust him now? He could have lied about that too. Olivia sipped her coffee, thinking, you know, I think he's telling the truth about not loving her, romantically. But emotional connection is also a kind of intimacy. And the fact that he hid it from you shows that he himself understands. This isn't just friendship. I nodded. Olivia, as always, hit the nail on the head. What should I do? I asked helplessly. First, decide if you can forgive him for this lie, she answered. If yes, then you need to rebuild trust. If not, she didn't finish the sentence. I don't want to destroy our marriage, I said quietly. We've been together for 5 years. I love him. Then you need to talk, Olivia said firmly, openly, set boundaries. He needs to understand that this situation is unacceptable to you. All evening I thought about our conversation. Olivia was right. Mark and I needed to clear the air. I waited for him at home, deciding we should discuss everything tonight. But Mark returned unusually agitated. Jessica called, he said as soon as he came in. She knows everything about you seeing our conversation, about our talk. I froze. You told her? Yes, he admitted. Right after our conversation, I thought it would be honest, to let her know that you're now aware of our communication. A new wave of hurt washed over me. So his first instinct was to run to her, discussing our marital problems with his ex-wife? And what did she say? I asked coldly. She was upset, said she was sorry it turned out this way, that she never wanted to create problems in our marriage. I felt uneasy. For some reason, Jessica's words, relayed through Mark, hurt me more than anything else. As if she really cared about our marriage, while my own husband thought it normal to hide their communication from me. She suggested, Mark hesitated, meeting all of us together, so you could see that there's nothing like that between us. I laughed, bitterly, almost hysterically. Seriously? You think that's a good idea? To arrange a friendly get-together with your ex-wife, whom you've been secretly communicating with behind my back? I'm just relaying what she suggested, Mark defended himself. I think it might help. You'd see that she's just a normal person, not some threat. I looked at him and didn't recognize him. Where was that sensitive, understanding man I married? Did he really not understand how much this hurt me? No, I said firmly. I won't meet her, and I want you to stop communicating with her, completely. Mark flinched. Emma, that's not fair. We're just friends. You can't forbid me. I'm not forbidding, I interrupted. I'm setting a condition. Either you choose our marriage and end communication with her, or I couldn't finish the sentence. Or what? He asked quietly. You'll file for divorce? Because I'm in touch with my ex-wife? We stood in the middle of the living room, looking at each other like strangers. Between us seemed to be a wall, transparent but impenetrable. Not because you're in touch with her, I finally said, but because you lied to me, lied for a year, met her secretly, made up excuses, kept it hidden. If you had just told me at the very beginning, I'm in contact with Jessica again, we're messaging, everything would have been different. But you chose deception. Mark lowered his head. I was afraid of what? My jealousy? Or that I would see what you didn't want to admit to yourself, that something unsaid remained between you? He was silent, and in his silence I saw the answer. I need to think, he said finally. This is difficult. Jessica was an important part of my life. And what am I? I asked, feeling tears welling up. Just another chapter that will soon end too? No. He stepped toward me, tried to embrace me, but I pulled away. You're my wife, my love. I don't want to lose you. Then choose, I said quietly. Now. We resolved nothing that evening. The conversation reached an impasse, and we went to separate rooms. He to the bedroom, I again to the guest room. In the morning, Mark left for work early, without even waking me. All day, I couldn't find peace. Couldn't work, couldn't eat. Just kept thinking about our conversation, about what had happened. Recalling 5 years of our marriage, was there something I'd missed? Were there signs that he wasn't completely happy with me? In the evening, a message came from Mark. We'll be late today. Need to think about a lot. Don't wait up for dinner. I didn't reply, just sat in the kitchen, looking out the window until it got dark. Then I decided to call my mother-in-law. Patricia, I said when she answered. Sorry for the late call. I wanted to ask, did you know Mark is in contact with Jessica? There was a pause on the line, then Patricia sighed. I did. He didn't tell me directly, but I saw her name on his phone screen when he was visiting us, and heard some things from mutual acquaintances. Why didn't you tell me? I asked without accusation, just with sadness. Not my business, Emma, she answered gently. I didn't want to interfere. Thought maybe you and Mark had discussed it. Maybe you knew. I didn't know, I said quietly. Until this week, I didn't know. Patricia was silent for a moment, then spoke carefully. I'm not making excuses for him, Emma. He should have been honest with you. But I know my son. He wouldn't risk your marriage for a fleeting infatuation. If he hid this from you, it means he himself didn't fully understand what was happening. Her words strangely comforted me. At least she didn't rush to defend her son or accuse me of excessive jealousy. I don't know what to do, I confessed. I asked him to choose, either stop communicating with her or what? Patricia quickly asked. Or our marriage is over, I replied, surprised myself at the firmness in my voice. Patricia sighed. I understand you, sweetie. But don't rush into decisions. Sometimes people do foolish things not out of malice, but simply because they're confused. Give him time to think, and yourself too. After talking with her, I felt a little better. At least I knew I wasn't alone in this situation, that someone else saw my pain and understood it. Mark returned late, around 11. I was still sitting in the kitchen, flipping through an old magazine I wasn't even reading. Hi, he said quietly, sitting across from me. Can we talk? I nodded, putting aside the magazine. I've been thinking all day, Mark began, about us, about Jessica, about all of this. And I realized what I've done. I shouldn't have hidden our correspondence from you. It was dishonest, wrong. I got confused, Emma. He really looked exhausted, eyes reddened, hair disheveled. I wrote to Jessica, he continued. Told her we can't communicate anymore, that it's hurting my marriage, and you're more important to me than anything. I looked at him, not knowing what to feel. Joy? Relief? Or was this too easy a solution for such a complex problem? What did she say? I asked. She understood, said Mark. Wrote that she was sorry about the situation and wishes us happiness. Again, this Jessica, so understanding, so noble. I felt a pang of irritation, but suppressed it. And you won't communicate with her anymore, I clarified. No, he said firmly. I choose us, Emma, you, our marriage. I don't want to lose you. He reached across the table, and this time I didn't pull away. Let him take my fingers in his. It still hurts, I admitted. I don't know if I can fully trust you again. I understand, he nodded, and I'll do everything to regain your trust. It will take time, but I'm ready to wait and work on it, on us. We sat silently, holding hands across the kitchen table. In this silence was no comfort, but there was something like a truce, a first step toward healing. I love you, he said, and in his voice I heard sincerity. Only you, Emma. I nodded, unable yet to say the same words back. The wound was still too fresh. Almost 3 months have passed since then. Mark and I are gradually returning to normal life. He's become more open, tells me about his day, his colleagues, his projects. I see how he's trying to restore my trust. We even started seeing a marriage counselor. It was my idea, and Mark agreed without objection. There we talk about things we used to keep silent about, learn to listen to each other, understand each other's needs. What surprised me most was how much Mark revealed about his first marriage in these sessions, about how deeply the miscarriage affected him, though he never showed it to Jessica, about how he felt unable to support her in her depression, about how after the divorce he decided he would never allow himself to be that vulnerable again. "I didn't let myself grieve," he admitted one day. "I thought I had to be strong, move forward, and I ended up just burying it all inside." I began to understand why he reached out to Jessica a year ago. Not because he still loved her, but because she was a witness to that part of his life that he never allowed himself to fully experience and release. Our therapist says this happens often. People return to former partners to close emotional loose ends, to finish what remained unfinished. The problem wasn't that Mark was communicating with Jessica, but that he hid it from me, creating a zone of secrecy in our relationship. I don't know if he'll keep his promise to never communicate with her again. Honestly, now that I better understand the situation, I'm not sure that's the right solution. Maybe someday I'll be able to feel comfortable with their communication if it's open, without secrets. But right now, I'm just learning to trust my husband again. Every day I see his efforts, his desire to save our marriage. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night with anxious thoughts. Sometimes I still feel like he's hiding something. But these moments are becoming less frequent. Yesterday, for the first time in a long while, we genuinely laughed together, watching some silly comedy. It was a moment of simple, unburdened happiness. And I thought, maybe we'll get through this. Maybe this crack in our marriage will ultimately make it stronger, force us to be more honest with each other. Mark said recently that he's grateful I gave him a chance, that many people in my position would have just packed their bags and left. I don't know if that's true. I only know that love is a choice we make every day. And for now, I choose to believe our story isn't over yet. This morning, as Mark was getting ready for work, he kissed me goodbye as always. Only now he looked straight into my eyes, without a hint of the unsaid, without hidden thoughts. And I suddenly realized a simple truth. He still looked at me the same way, as if nothing had happened. Only now I knew he never fully left the past behind. But maybe that's not necessary. Maybe what matters isn't what he took from there, but what he managed to bring into our present.